Pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Mrs. Meenakshi Balakrishnan. Is a senior advisor at CLLE. She brings with her 30 plus years of diverse experience relating to school leadership, teacher development, and providing strategic advice pertaining to change management and developing leadership at various levels at educational institutions. At CLLE, ma'am advises us on innovative curriculum design and research-driven pedagogic approaches to achieve learning impact. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to you. Kindly take over the session.
Thank you, Nagamani, for the introduction. Welcome to our panel discussion, the Talk Learning series of Center for Learning, Leadership and Excellence. Today's talk is on leadership for learning. We have with us our esteemed speakers with years of experience in leadership positions. Let's learn and start a dialogue to discuss the nuances of leadership for learning. I shall now introduce our panelists. Mr. Lakshminarayan KR, also known as LAN, is the Chief Endowment Officer in charge of managing investments from the Asim Premji Foundation. He works with $9.75 billion endowment fund. He also actively participates in the Asim Premji charitable projects, which are carried out through two non-profit organizations, the Asim Premji Foundation and the Asim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives. Land worked for Wipro Limited for 17 years, holding positions such as the Chief Strategy Officer, CFO of the IT company, and Corporate Treasurer and Head of Investor Relations. Mr. Lakshminarayana oversaw many major milestones during his time at Wipro, including over $1.2 billion in strategic M&A agreements, the incubation of new business units, the introduction of the organized treasury systems, and the investor relation, the IR department. Mr. Lakshminarayan holds a Six Sigma Black Belt certification, and he's a licensed management accountant and an MBA graduate and a PhD from IIM Lucknow. Passionate about quizzing and financial research, he also volunteers at the Nudge Center for Social Innovation, where he mentors young entrepreneurs in the social sector. Our next speaker is Professor Sahai, who taught at the London Business School, where he had been teaching after completing his PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. He's an alumnus of the IIM Ahmedabad, where he did his PGDM, and IIT Kanpur, where he did his BTech. Professor teaches marketing and international business at IIM Ahmedabad, is the chairperson of the India Gold Policy Center, and is the chairperson of the NSE Center for Behavioral Science in Economics, Finance, and Marketing. His primary areas include marketing strategy, pricing, neuroscience, and consumer behavior, brand management, high-tech marketing, international trade, and investment. He leads the IMA Executive Education Program on pricing, neuroscience and marketing, enhancing sales force performance, and fintech. He has written 32 international peer-reviewed articles, 65 cases, and more than 50 articles for business magazines and newspapers. His latest book on brands and the brain was published in April 2022. His latest publication in 2022 are on Neural Correlates the Weak Brand Choice and the decisions between gift and promotions in consumer choice. He's been a regular columnist for various business magazines and occasionally for various Indian newspapers like the Financial Express, Dainik Bhaskar on gold, business, and economics. Professor Sahai is the recipient of many awards, but notably the most important of them are the Outstanding Dissertation Award for his PhD thesis and also the winner of the Philip Morris Best Case Award at IMA. He's also been the best marketing professor in India, conferred on him by UTV Bloomberg, and also the Best Teacher Award in Marketing by the Devang Mehta. He's also nominated as the 50 thinkers in the India list by the Institute of Competitiveness by the Harvard Business School. He's a director on many boards of companies and is a member of the working group on gold established by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and of the Niti Aayog Committee to transform gold markets. Our next speaker is Dr. Sanjeev Dixit. He's an acclaimed global HR leader, CHRO, global culture coach, speaker, trainer, and author of the highly acclaimed culture transformation book called Plan C. However, he prefers to be called an ideapreneur, as he's been growing personally and professionally by ideating and executing unconventional and path-breaking businesses transformation ideas. As a global human resource leader, he has over 22 years of strategic corporate experience under his belt across various industries. He holds a doctorate in HR management and organization development from the renowned Academy of Human Resources Development, Ahmedabad. He's also a chartered fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personal and Development, UK, and a fellow certified practitioner in HR from the Australian Human Resource Institute, Melbourne, Australia. Presently, he's working as the president of HR Cadila Pharmaceuticals, Ahmedabad. Welcome to our chat show of the talk series of CLLE. Today, as part of this series, we have our talk titled Leadership for Learning. World over, people are curious and fascinated by leaders and their success stories. The various reasons for their success can be attributed to many factors, as their personality, attitude, industriousness, or even academic excellence. This list is endless. Maslow's theory says every individual has a particular point of view. Learners make their own meaning through transformative learning. Let me ask our esteemed speakers for their opening remarks on leadership for learning. Professor Sahai's perspective on leadership for learning. What would you say about the leading learning in academic institutions to achieve the desired outcomes? Professor Sahai.
Thank you, Meenakshi. And I feel kind of a little bit on the spot because you've asked me to go before my more experienced and senior colleagues, Dr. Dixit and Dr. Lakshmi Narayan, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Let me divide your question into two parts. One is the learning part and the other is the leadership part. And then I'll combine it into leadership for learning with the idea that what are the kinds of leadership that at the institutional level that enable better learning outcomes in classrooms and for students. So learning outcomes to me happen when there is engagement and between the learner and the content and between the learner and the teacher. And this is as applicable at the age of 4, 5, 6 as it is at the age of 17, 18, 19, as at 25, 26, 40, 55, doesn't really matter. So it's about engagement between the learner and the content that he or she is trying to assimilate. And part of that process of assimilation and engagement happens through either the teacher or the platform and the medium through which the learning is taking place. And that these could be these days in asynchronous media as well. The best teachers, of course, are the ones that are able to create that engagement and that connect with the content so that the learner is able to assimilate that content, not just from a cognitive standpoint, from a reason standpoint, but also emotionally. It becomes a part of the mental makeup of the learner, and they can then reproduce that learning at will. Unless you can reproduce the learning at will, there's not really going to be much learning. So that's the part about learning that I want to emphasize. So, for example, in my own case, if I were to look at learning and I look at some content from the book that I published recently, I will find that people who have taken my neuroscience and consumer behavior class tend to have a deeper appreciation of the content, partly because I engage with the participants in the classroom. I push them I challenge them so that literally there's no place to hide, and they'll end up learning despite themselves, perhaps. So that's the part about learning. Now, what about leadership? And how does institutional leadership enable learning? This is the part perhaps where I think we can do so much more here in India, because institutional leadership of academic institutions that actually facilitates learning needs to up its game considerably more. Apart from a few institutions, whether they are at the higher educational level or at the secondary educational or at the primary educational level, by and large in our country, the institutional academic leadership does not have the skill set that facilitates the classroom process, that encourages the classroom process, or even more broadly speaking, that facilitates how teachers and learners can come together to enhance the learning outcomes. Now, what does one mean by that? Let us, take the instance without going into particular role designations, whether it is vice chancellors or principals or deans or and so on. That particular individual who is holding that position, they really need to have a respect for teachers and for the learning process. You might have a principal or a dean or a vice chancellor who is an excellent, outstanding scholar, but does not really understand the first thing about the teaching process and the learning process. And so as an institutional leadership, where the leader of the institution does not understand or lacks respect for the learning process or the teaching process, that automatically translates into a whole bunch of faculty members, teachers, who also take their cue or signals, unless you're really passionate about that whole learning process as a teacher. And then what happens is that the relative impact in the learning process in the classroom or otherwise also starts to decrease, because the leadership of the institution is not engaged with, is not invested in, does not care as deeply and passionately about the learning process as they should. And that signal then passes along the line, and the outcomes start to become less than optimal for students, for learners in various places. Having said that, now the good news today is that technology is enabling us to reach a place where learners can take a fair amount of the responsibility into their own hands. They don't need to depend on the teacher. They can simply go out there and pick up a whole bunch of content, asynchronous content that has been created, and some of it is interactive, that allows the learning process to proceed even without the teacher to a large extent. And so to the extent that leaders of large institutions can encourage the development of more such content, the more powerful will be the potential learning outcomes. So let me pause there. I could go on, but I would like to pause and listen to my colleagues as well.
Thank you, Professor Sahai. That's wonderful, because one, you talked about respect and empathy that leaders must have, and also that learners are looking at content. And if the leaders are able to create good content for learning, then automatically the whole scenario changes for the learners as well. My next question is to Mr. Lakshminarayanan. What are the differences and similarities between social and the corporate sector in leadership for learning? And with the tons of experience that you have, we're just looking forward to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity to share and learn in this forum. At one level, there is really the similarities are so many. At its core, leadership is inseparable from learning. So there's a lot of things common across the sector. If I may just take one slice of that, every leadership has what I call the ATM factor. There is an administrative aspect to every leadership role. There's a technical aspect to every leadership role, and there's a mentorship aspect to every leadership role. So be it in the academics world, or be it in the corporate or social sector, anywhere else, all these three factors come into account. Two, there's also so much emphasis in leadership, in any leadership, on building and continuing culture. I'm sure we'll talk more about it as we go along, but that's a very important. So these are stuff that are continuous. Where I think the differences start to come about, and let me talk of one place where perhaps a leadership challenge in social sector is less than where it is in the corporate world. The first is the goal alignment and the purpose alignment. Very often people who come into the social sector have made a choice of wanting to do that. And therefore all the people in the academic world or the social world have all chosen to do what they want in that particular sphere. In a corporate world, someone might be in finance, but someone might be in a finance in a IT company versus a bank. And that's a choice that they don't kind of have. So
I think we are losing out. We're losing out, Mr. Lakshminarayana.
Sorry, I think I got for a second. I got blanked out.
Yeah.
So I said that the alignment, the purpose alignment is a challenge in a corporate sector, because you've got to get people aligned, and there's a lot of effort that people that organizations put into getting the whole organization aligned. In social sector, because of the choice that people make, that's an easier. Having said that, the difficulty in the social sector are again very many. I will just highlight 3 of them for the sake of it, and I'll pause. First is the entire context of control. In a corporate environment, we are working in an environment where a significant factors are under our control, a reasonable control. Production is under control. The resources we put into marketing is reasonably under control. Product quality, those are stuff that we think we can sort of kind of control. In the social sector, first of all, there is a difference between whom you work with and what you want to do. So for example, if you want to work with the challenges of adolescent girls in India, a lot of work has to happen with the parents and the boys in the community, right? So there is a whole, so thinking through that on a systemic matter, that's one aspect of control. So the big thing is about control. The second big challenge is about the constraints on very often in a company, your customer is a person who has a need, and you want to fulfill that need. In the social context, very often that nexus is not that clear. So you're working with in what in corporate world we call the VUCA world. It's much more volatile, it's much more uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. It's just that much more in the social sector. Third, in the social sector, much more than the corporate world, you have a very large amount of interaction with government and governance, which you have much lesser in the corporate world. So how does a leadership navigate not just your immediate set of stakeholders, employees, shareholders, and many others, but also the government agencies? And government can range all the way from the union government to the person in the village, the tehsildar, the village accountant, all of them. So these add certain amount of complexity. So I think they are at one level very, very similar. At another level, there are a lot of differences that one can sort of go through. And that's what makes the whole space so much more interesting.
Excellent, Mr. Lakshminarayan. I think what I really take from this is the content of control in the social sector, and also the need which gets fulfilled in customers vis-a-vis in the social context, which is so different when your customer needs are so different, and in how the leaderships navigate through the various areas and the various departments and government agencies that look forward to customer relations and about how the area of work endows with. So thank you for that lovely introductory talk. And now I would like to ask Dr. Sanjeev. He's famous for his Plan C book and also his research on organization culture. Dr. Sanjeev, how is the culture of the organization with respect to leadership and sustainable learning? May I have your thoughts, please?
Sure. So thank you, Meenakshi, and the entire CLLE team to have me, and very glad to kind of interact with the august audience here. So being a student of culture, I think I've tried both the what you call path, corporate as well as academic, because while doing my PhD on the linkage between the values role model by the leaders on the employee engagement and then further on the business performance. And then further, then I kind of build on it in terms of writing my first management book on the how to build a culture through a absolutely focused plan called Plan C. What I realize is the very core definition of culture, a core understanding of what culture is. I think culture is the most, I will not say abused word, but most misunderstood term, very, what you call loosely used in terms of, okay, it is a sum of all the values and belief of the entire, what you call organization or people in the entire group. But what I realized out of my 25 years of corporate experience in working with all kind of managers and leaders and followers, culture is primarily the behaviors demonstrated by the most influential people in any setup, not necessarily organization. If you take from a context of a nation, obviously the most influential people we know who are those. Right? There could be the head of the state or president or the prime minister. Similarly, if you go to the organization perspective, these are all your chief executive officers and CXOs. And if you talk from a family unit perspective, it is the parents, the father and the mother. Now the behaviors they demonstrate immediately get cascaded into the what you call the behavior exhibited, or you can say imbibed by the people down below. And from a context of the learning, I think culture plays a very, very significant role, because the way the leaders, or for example, the most influential people in any what you call organization setup, what you call demonstrate the importance of learning, demonstrate the importance of the ecosystem and the environment, which further you can say encourage cross-pollination of ideas, encourage dialogue, encourage I will say accountability in terms of how I'm mentoring and coaching and kind of upskilling my team. I think that's where we create kind of a sustainable, you can say institutionalized, you can say mechanism by which learning becomes a part of way of working. It does not become any kind of esoteric discussion or intellectual discussion in the boardroom or in the various policy meeting discussions. But it's become part of as I said, the way of working, in the way the senior leaders and the senior people coach their team members, help them to grow to the next level of performance and you can say productivity, and continue to what you call in a very organic manner replace the talent above. And that's how the entire, you can say, journey keeps happening. And if you take a case study of any, you can say, best-in-class organization or institution or a setup, we will see that this process is so organic and so, you can say, institutionalized that we don't call it learning. It becomes a kind of, you can say, experience sharing and perspective sharing, and I will call it a reflection. So it's become part of the reflection, the way the organization operate, the leadership operate, all the what you call senior role model people do the entire reflection on the learning, which is kind of a legacy, keep moving from one what you call level to another, one generation to another, one system and process to another. So that my opening perspective from the culture.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And I think what's really coming out is like the behavior of the leader, how it impacts the behavior of learning. And what I really like was like the sharing experiences, the perspective, and reflective practitioners. So if leaders are reflective practitioners, it will automatically trickle into the larger group or the common goal of the organization. Thank you for your opening thoughts, all of you. And now we will proceed further. And so let me ask how leaders view their professional autonomy, because the challenge is to conceptualize how to connect leadership practice with learning and then mobilize others' energies and commitment accordingly. The challenge implicates not only individual leaders operating from their respective vantage points in a complicated system, but all of them together, which is what we've been talking about initially. How are they to bring their collective efforts to bear on tasks of improving learning for all? And it also implicates a larger set of players whose actions guide or support leadership practice. How do they create conditions that prompt and enable leaders to constructively influence a learning organization or an academic institution? How does leadership influence learning? Mr. Lakshminarayan, your thoughts on this, please.
Wow, that's a lot of questions, and it's a very heavy one. It's a deep question at multiple levels. In general, leadership and creating a learning organization, learning environment is challenging in every place, but definitely much more so in a context of an academic institution, which is ironically set up for imparting learning, creating a learning culture is that much more difficult. So let me just take a stab at it. I know my other two colleagues have much more experience on that. I will take a stab at it from 2 points, which I'll share 2 thoughts. The first from if I were to say that increasingly the choices that you have to make are what I call the choices between good and good, right? For instance, all of us, if I take resources as an example, there's a set of resources all of us have. How do we make the best use of it? None of the things that is, when I say, let me make it more specific, the resource called time, right? All of us have a limited amount of time. It's the same time for everybody, for more. Now, how do I make the best use of it? The choice between trading off between doing something A versus B is not a choice, very often not between good and bad. It's very often a choice between good and good. Okay, so that's one thing we have to keep in mind, because one of the, I think, things that we struggle about when we talk of creating learning organization. So for instance, I do work with a lot of young entrepreneurs in the social sector. They are young kids in their 20s who have started an NGO, leaving corporate jobs to solve a society's problem. As they scale up their organization, and we talk to them about building organization culture, learning, how do you constantly learn from everybody else? They often think that this has to come at the cost of doing the work on the ground and solving the community's problem. So they seem to think that this is a choice between I'm giving up something, I'm sacrificing something. Okay? I would like to first of all kind of posit that it's often a choice between good and good. So there is nothing right or wrong in this choice. That's what makes it complex. Second is, how does one achieve balance across these three? Right? I gave earlier example of that ATM, right? Which is the administrative, technical, and mentorship angle. I mean, that's one practical way of looking at it. How does one do that? Now, I think the way to do that, and I think Dr. Dixit talked about it, is to walk the talk right from the senior most level. You need leaders to practice. If I, as an organization leader, want to create a learning, for instance, one part of my job is about investments, and I have a team that does investments, and I have a belief that a lot of investment you do is based on understanding of history, both corporate history and general history. So we started a process by which my investment team periodically sits. When I say once in 15 days, a calendarized day, when one of the persons will take an episode from a history or a book from history and talk about it. So it has to come down to rituals, it has to come down to practice, and it must begin right at the top. So I think a lot of institutions has to come, and it's not enough it's done only at the top. The second big challenge is that very often people say that I do this and nobody else does. For this has to get institutionalized, it has to come into process. Only then will I. And the last point I will put here is that it is not enough to have a ritual. It must be a ritual with deep meaning. I mean, everyone must connect to it. For example, if I have a ritual, again, using the investment example, every firm has a Monday morning meeting before the markets open, right? Many firms, it's a 5-minute, people just do it as a ritual, have coffee and go. But if you have to make meaning on of it, you must say that these 4 or 5 things that we discuss has an implication that everyone must understand it and own it. So, and all that boils down to, that's all the role of the leader. The leader has to set up the ritual, has to walk the talk, and set up, make sure that everyone understands the importance and practice it. I think that's one way of doing it. I'm sure there are other ways. I'm keen to hear from others as well.
That's wonderful, Ms. Lakshminarayan. I really love the fact that you talk about ritual with deep meaning and how to take history as an example and take it forward, because the lessons you learn from history is mostly in a textbook and forgotten. I'm glad here we take lessons from history and learn from them, whether it's investments or otherwise, or the geographies of the country. It really helps us to connect and institutionalize. When the leader says something, it dissipates whatever, and it trickles down. And I think that's what's coming out from what you've said just now. I think I'd like to have my second speaker, Professor Sahai. What do you think about leadership influencing learning from an academic institution point of view?
I want to pick up on the point that was made by Mr. Lakshminarayanan, that it is kind of ironic that academic institutions, which are supposed to provide the learning, sometimes end up as places which actually do not do that as much as they can. And sadly, in our country, perhaps that is more widely prevalent and true than not. You can count on the fingers of probably both hands, or maybe slightly more, the number of institutions where learning by and large takes place in the way, I'm talking about higher education institutions, by and large takes place in the way that it's supposed to. So what has not worked from the perspective of these institutions, and how much does leadership have to do with it? So the primary thing for a lot of higher educational academic institutions in this country that does not work is the issue that administration kind of takes primacy over faculty, over learning, over students. Processes take primacy over learning, over curiosity, over facilities that can facilitate learning. And the processes that allow good faculty to be able to create the environment that can facilitate the learning process have to emanate, as both my colleagues have said, from the leadership, from the top. At IIM Ahmedabad, for instance, you could argue that a culture of learning was put in place a long time ago from the first 2 full-time directors, Professor Samuel Paul, who was the second director, and Ravi Mathai, who was the first director, where they put in place processes where respect for faculty and their ability to and their trust in the faculty to do the best that was possible for the students, put in place a kind of an egalitarian culture that allowed faculty to pursue their passions, their dreams. And of course, then you choose people very carefully that you let into the whole circle, because they need to conform to a certain set of values so that then it becomes a self-perpetuating process. So to kind of build on that idea, therefore, if you really want to provide leadership for learning, be very, very careful in the people that you let into your organization as faculty members, as administrators. They really have to value learning. They need to put that process of learning and generating learning outcomes before everything else for the rest to follow, for the institutionalization that you are talking about. Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan referred to ritualizing with meaning, but that ritualizing with meaning, that meaning part will happen when people are actually inclined to behave in a certain way. They subscribe to a certain set of values related to learning, not just at the top, but right across, because the leader as an individual can only do so much. Ultimately, there is a larger set of people, including the faculty and critically the administrators, that need to behave in a certain way. When, for example, a faculty member starts focusing too much on research and not enough on learning outcomes for students, then that faculty member is not really contributing as much to the learning process as they can. A professor is supposed not just to generate knowledge, but also to profess, to disseminate knowledge, to be able to internalize that knowledge amongst next generation of learners. And that is only going to happen when the faculty member has an internalized set of values, whether that is generated internally or through external cues and incentives over a period of time, that pushes that faculty member to create the processes, the environment, and the learning outcomes for the students that enhance learning for everyone concerned, including the faculty member. A lot of faculty members tend to sometimes think that, I am the guy with the knowledge and I really do not have much to learn, but that's so not true. I think a true faculty member is always on a voyage of learning themselves. There is so much that one can learn from the participants in a program, in a classroom, and so on. So leadership ultimately is about creating the enabling environment. The ritualizing with meaning is about gathering a set of people who have a certain set of values, which makes it a self-sustaining dynamic over a period of time. And that is the challenge of, I think, a lot of our academic institutions, that they are locked into a low-level equilibrium. And how does one bring them out of that low-level equilibrium? And their leadership will matter, but a single person is not going to be able to accomplish much. It needs a cadre of people, at least 5, 10, 15 people who are committed to this set of learning values and outcomes. And then it will start to take wings. And then you will have many more IITs and IIM class of higher educational institutions, or really good middle school and primary school institutions.
Thank you, Professor Sahai. I think what's coming out of your talk is about being a lifelong learner, and more than anything else, that the organization must create people or have people who have got the fuel in them to be where they are. So the spot at where they belong, they should really be learning, they should be curious, and then that will be sustainable, because if they are going to be constantly enabling the students with curiosity and a culture of thinking in an organization where we talk about culture of learning. I think that was wonderful. And I think now I'm going to the pet topic of Dr. Sanjeev. I'm going to move on to the next question, and that is about organization culture, right? To achieve this means recognizing any change, the way we do things around here, pushes people out of their comfort zone, and it creates both sometimes discomfort and resistance. And sometimes the organization culture also talks about answering questions about what happened within one's areas of responsibility and providing a reliable story of practice. What has happened and why has it taken place? So Dr. Sanjeev, my question is, how can leaders help in organization in the larger scheme of things? How can we create entry points into professional dialogue about learning experiences, serving to inform practice so as to achieve the greatest learning benefits for all? What is consistent with the goals of learning-centered leadership? Your pet topic, Dr. Sanjeev, and that's why I thought I'll give it a shot to you.
I think the
Please.
question in itself is a phenomenal scope of learning. The way you articulated the question, I think if you dwell upon each and every word and the element of those words, I think we can create a entire learning thesis out of that. But coming to the core point. So let me get into the fundamentals. What is the object for which we are having this entire discussion around? Now, if we are talking about the leadership for learning, now if we just simplify it and little you can say demystify it, exercising leadership in itself is a learning. Right? What is leadership? So leadership is all about facilitating the, as I said, the environment and the ecosystem, which create a lot of tolerance for mistakes, a lot of experimentation, a lot of, I will say, innovative, you can say, going or challenging the status quo, encouraging people to have a very constructive, open dialogue, wherein all the, you can say, legacy, you can say, systems, practices, principles, philosophies are kind of not only reflected upon, but also kind of, you can say, cushioned upon. And I think that is where we move towards what you said, the leadership-centered learning. Now, and again, from the context of how the entire orientation of people are in any setup for that matter, including the you can say corporate setup or the organization. So there are two set of you can say orientation. One is, I call it managership and not leadership. Now, what is managership? The managership is going by the convention. Okay, learning means literacy, right? So if I am literate about a particular what you call practices or system or way of working, yeah, we are learned. No, that's not learning. Most of us are literate, not necessarily learning, right? It's as good as saying that I'm literate, but at the same time, am I educated? So what I'm saying is the managership is most of the time you see, because these are the people who have been kind of, you can say, become, you can say, trapped into the same way of working because of which they have achieved success. And as somebody question them or challenge them, they feel insecure. You know, they will immediately snub. They will say, no, this is not what is the right way of doing things. So do the things the way we are telling you. So this is the category of people what I call the managership, right? And in a my terminology of plan A, plan B, and plan C, these are the plan A and plan B people. When I say A, plan A is mostly the action. It's all about having a learning plan and I execute it. I get a desired output, not necessarily, right? The plan B is mostly the backup. B stand for backup. Okay, if my plan A doesn't work in terms of desired output, I use my plan B. But then these plan A and plan B has been what you call, I think, followed across. Even if you look at the way our education system is, it doesn't what you call either orient you or develop you to be a leader who foster the culture of learning, right? It's all about following convention.
Right.
It's all about following convention. The moment you become unconventional, you are either a rebel or outlier, or I think then we try to kind of categorize you or bucket you in some other kind of area.
Right.
So for me, these are the plan A and plan B managership. Now comes to the plan C, leadership, what we call about. That's where you come across very secure, you can say, leaders or the role models who have again learned out of not only books or theories and research papers, they have learned out of learning from other experiences.
Right.
Learn from the, what you call the environment which they are operating in. Learning by, as I said, asking very pointed questions, whether that is the right model. And that is where I think being a rebellion becomes the a fundamental, I will say, framework and model of learning. Yeah. And I think I've seen such leaders in my career, in my what do you call, even whether it is educational career or in my corporate career, people who have challenged you or challenged the team or challenged the people down below, that is it the best way to do things, or there could be another way to better the existing thing. I think these kind of what you call, you can say queries oriented, question oriented, challenge oriented approach, I will say initiate a cascading effect.
Right.
It initiate a cascading effect, and what you call, trust me, the entire 90% of your organization is followers. You have those 10% of leaders who set those, as I said, value system, which are the, you can say, I will say the lighthouse or the anchoring point, basis which all the followers follow the entire, you can say, path of constant, you can say, what do you call, reflection in investigating and in having a very interrogating approach.
Right.
And then you create that kind of leadership-centered learning. If I've answered, I don't know. I followed a very unconventional path.
Right now, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, better now.
Yeah. I think I missed out Dr. Sanjeev's couple of points right now, but I mean, the sum and the crux of it is
I think Meenakshi, your network is little uneven, because of which I think
yes, I hope I got that right from you. Now, increasingly, learning is central for those interested in management and leadership. They work together to develop guiding day-to-day decisions. Having a say gives a sense of efficacy, and in turn, those norms and values serve to maintain consistency in quality through guidance and accountability. A strong professional community is also marked by social trust and confidence that the colleagues and
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear Dr. Meenakshi. Is everyone able to hear?
I think her system is stuck, it seems.
Yeah.
I think her network is giving her a problem, I suppose.
The network challenge,
Yes, network challenge. Ma'am, are you able to hear us?
No, her image is frozen, and I think she just dropped out.
She's dropped out. Yeah. I'll just.
Can you hear my question, Nagmani?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now.
Yeah, we would
come back online.
Yeah, so I was talking to Mrs. Lakshminarayan about building trust and dialogue for learning. Can you answer that question?
You'll have to repeat the question. I don't think I got the question. I think we lost you for.
Sorry about it. I'm talking about collective norms and practices of values and day-to-day guiding decisions. So a strong professional community is marked by trust and confidence and the colleagues who are competent, honest, and committed. So how do organizations, like how does your organization deal with trust and dialogue for learning? How do you initiate that? Or is it like it's part of the dialogue, like, okay, your history lessons and connecting with rituals and connecting with meaningful practices? How does trust, because it's so important, like we said, there is a choice between good and good. So how do I make that choice? How do I build trust and dialogue with my subordinates, with my team? And obviously here we're talking about leadership, which is probably more democratic than otherwise. So
Yeah,
what would
again,
your take be
it's a
on building
great
trust?
question. Yeah, it's a great
Sorry.
question, and I think uh, this is a goal that all of us in organizations who want to build great organizations try and do that. I'll just share a couple of experiments we have done. And first of all, I think it has to start, I think Professor Sahai talked about it. It has to start right at the recruitment stage. Are you getting in people who have that openness? He talked about in the academic thing, but I can also tell you it's no different. I'm sure all of our experience in any sector, saying that there are some people who are naturally not collaborative in this environment. Maybe there's another environment they will thrive, but some people are each thing. So you got to make sure that we do that. As far as openness and the building of the trust is concerned, a few years we did a very interesting experiment, which is that in our organization the interviews are not hierarchical. So for example, it's not that the first interview is taken by the junior person, then somebody else, then somebody else, then the head of HR, then the functional head, then the CEO. Very often the interviews happen across at different levels in some ways, which means even from the person who coming in is told that we don't want to think of it hierarchically. So when they come in, the first question they ask is, oh, but my final interview was with, and we have one thing that there's one interview that's happened done by a person who's not at all concerned with that role or the department. So he had nothing. So how does it work? And we said, no, all interviews are taken in and the inputs taken and decision is made. So it was an experiment to just drive home a message that we don't want to think that while there is a respect for an individual, there's no respect for a hierarchy. There's the thing. So and the second thing, because in this mode everybody's inputs comes in together, the input of let's say the first person in the screening to the last person from a seniority point of view is all taken together. That again tries to build a culture. I talked about in our investment team what we do about history. Very often in a typical firm, you would say that, okay, a work like this, you have to start with the junior most youngest team member will read whatever, a Russian history and kind of present. We did the study on Ukraine when the Ukraine war broke out. We did the study of Russian history. We said, no, that was a research done by the senior most member of the team. So, and then presented. So first of all, the idea is to give up space for everyone to express them. So it starts at the recruitment stage. Then you provide ways for everyone to express themselves. Third, you've got to give a feedback. In fact, I very early on in my career, I had a situation where in an open house, I made a comment to the senior most leader in our organization. And he came back to me 1 week later with his feedback on my comment, saying, this is a suggestion you gave. It will work or not work for this is reason. Again, that kind of a stuff starts. So a lot of it, I would only submit is about how you behave, how you do that. And when you do this, not by chance, but as a process, then you institutionalize trust. Again, we have seen in organization that there are some leaders who are trusted. They are the go-to people. There are some leaders who know exactly when their team member is looking for a job outside or doing something or not happy or they have a problem at home. And some leaders seem completely oblivious to it. What makes a difference? Part of it is personality. So when you step back and look at it and say that, what if I want the whole organization to become like that? Then you start institutionalizing against a lot of small behaviors and you start practicing it. I think that's the only way. And the final thing, and I've learned this from some schools, I think, is that you have a constant, clear channel of communication. And the communication is not just a simple two-way, it's often a circular communication. It's what I call a community communication, where everyone sits together and talk to the extent possible, so that shows that everyone's getting the same thing at the same time. So you imbibe some of those into your internal organizational processes. So then I think you can start building toward trust. But this is one of those, this is one of those McInnes gold moments when you keep searching for that golden solution to this problem. It's not an easy one.
Right. Wonderful, Mr. Lakshminarayan. I really like the circle of trust with communication, because the more you speak out and express yourself, you're able to bring in the transparency that you're expecting, and that will slowly build the trust and make it the norm of the organization. That's really wonderful. We're like running short of time, so I've got a very nice question over here. And in the last decade or so, research has been talking about distributed leadership. Now, most of them are redefining leadership, and they're talking about understanding the development and possibilities of reforming, in fact, leadership and its, let us say, definition. We are learning leadership to share responsibilities as they build a team, so that they take responsibilities and improvement, and professional learning communities that are developed by continuous growth and the development of culture. So we're talking about leadership as a learning social participation that shapes not only what we do, but also who we are and how we interpret what we do. So how does this paradigm shift in learning relate to changes in leadership learning? Professor Sahai?
So actually, if I may, Meenakshi, I just want to pick up on one part of what Dr. Lakshminarayanan was talking about.
Sure.
Where he talked about this whole business of not by chance, but by process.
Right.
And I just wanted to share one example about the learning outcomes that get enhanced. So one of the things, for example, that we have practiced for a long time is an open feedback mechanism. So not only do students give us feedback as teachers, but that feedback as a teacher is open to all my colleagues. It does not matter whether the colleague has joined yesterday or has been around for 30 years. Each one of my colleagues knows how Arvind Sahai has performed on this class in this year and has done just now. So that puts an incredible amount of pressure on everyone to perform, and almost automatically pushes people to try and give their best in the classroom. It's a very small thing, but not very usual, because when some newer colleagues joined a few years ago, some of them were uncomfortable with the fact that this particular feedback belongs to me. Why should it be visible to everyone? But that very fact of visibility makes it so much more salient in everyone's mind, and there is an incredible amount of peer pressure and discussion about who did how well and so on, and so then it gets kind of baked into the culture. And you said about distributed leadership and learning, the present question that you have, the social context of that learning. So in a sense, this process provides that background social context. Or it's almost as if your social capital that you're building up within the institution as a teacher, as a leader, and even the leader is confirming to the same openness and transparency of the feedback, makes it almost inevitable that not by chance, but by process, the effort will go into that learning process. The values will get strengthened because people will behave in a certain way, and behavior then ultimately over a period of time creates, sustains, and rejuvenates that value of putting effort and valuing learning as a process and outcome.
So wonderful, Professor. I think basically we're talking about how it's more about the process than about the product, and how leadership at different levels, and the feedback mechanism. And then I also like what Mr. Lakshminarayan said, that when you're talking about recruitments, it can be across the team, across the group, about everybody expressing and communicating themselves. And I think now we are talking about leadership and responsibilities and how you build a team. So it became a vital concern for those interested in management and leadership, how to engage in conversations at a deep and rather than a surface level, how to work together to develop and redefine the collective norms and practices. So my question is, and this is for all the three of you, why is learning relevant today? How are you driving as individuals in your organization to build leadership? Because you're already there at leadership positions. You're already in charge of so many people below you who are subordinates. And probably let me talk about being a team. Yet, because of where you are, how do you see that you are building an institution and you're passing the baton on with the right values and the commitment and the concern for the organization, for the desired goals of the organization? So I will start with Dr. Sanjeev, and then Mr. Lakshmi Narayan, and then Dr. Sahai. Could you please put your thoughts together on telling us about how learning is relevant today, and how are you doing it in your own individual capacity? How are you building that?
I think, again, from unconventional perspective, not only relevant today, it's been universally relevant. Learning is, again, as I said, from a philosophical standpoint, is a continuum. And I think that sounds very nice for the intellectual audience. From a corporate perspective, I think we are more in terms of, I will say, a very practical and outcome-driven learning, because we always look from a perspective of ROI. We always look from the perspective of what are the tangible outcomes which is impacting the business, because we are not in the business of learning, but we are in the business of the entire impact the learning is giving to the overall organization deliverables, right? So learning becomes one of the most important, I will say, enabler, which then, as I said, become dovetail to your overall, I will say, organization growth vision. Then further that translated into the overall, I will say, the learning strategy or the business growth strategy. Learning is a strategy again from that perspective. And then further, what are those, as I said, the core values and the behaviors, which then becomes the, as I said, part of our way of working as an organization. And across the organization I've worked, the core part of this entire learning perspective was how it becomes all like a dynamic, relevant learning, more from the point of view of just in time. That's very, very critical. And I think because ultimately the time is a very, very important resource in a sense in a corporate setup, right? What you call relevant today might not be relevant tomorrow, compared to, say, academic institutions or any other institution for that matter, where you can have a little more aging of the entire whatever philosophy or concepts or anything for that matter. Because so from that context, as a leader, as a what you call HR enabler, the most important piece we are looking at how the learning is kind of, as I said, become part of your all the systems and processes. As Lakshmi was also talking about, from a hiring to the exit, how entire life cycle of the organization and employee has got all the milestones of various stages of, you can say, whether it is called functional learning, whether it is technical learning, whether it is behavioral learning, whether it is leadership learning, whether it is of environment learning. All aspect of learning is kind of become part and parcel of the what do we call the role profile, or the KRs and KPIs, the entire review mechanism, and even from the perspective of the growth. So how many people I have coached and trained in my what you call time frame, who has got then move into the next level. I think that is my KPI, and I think that then my growth is kind of what you call ensured in the organization. So I think putting a consequence and putting a stake on
Right.
learning into what you call tangible impact, and how each and every leader is contributing in the reinforcement of those behaviors, which again encourages the overall, you can say, the nurturing and development of the talent in the organization. I think that becomes the, I will say, the either the hallmark or the reference point of how we are growing year on year in terms of the way we able to de-risk the organization from upskilling the people, making the learning more of an institutionalized process, and we don't have any risk to the organization or the business, irrespective of whether COVID, no COVID,
Right.
pandemic, no pandemic. We are
Yeah.
all the time having that kind of a mechanism wherein you have a lot of internal talent groomed for taking up what you call new roles, or the dynamic roles which is coming because of the organization progress. And at the same time, we continue to challenge the status quo in terms of whatever is non-value adding processes and activities which are happening in the organization, how we remove it.
Right.
As if we are removing the deadwoods.
Right. Wonderful, Dr. Sanjeev, because I think that's really important, like nurturing talent and then taking them forward. That's wonderful. Mr. Lakshminarayan, what would your views be? How is it relevant today? And how do you sort of drive the individuals in your organization and pass the baton on? How will you do that in your organization?
I think the relevance, I think Dr. Dixit covered it so eloquently. I think it's always been relevant. It continues to be relevant. But I think what I would say we would focus on people learning to learn. There are many aspects, but if I were to oversimplify it and put into three things, right? First would be how are the contexts changing, right? Which means because we are constantly being bombarded with so many things in saying that this is changing, that is changing. How much of it is a fad versus how much is sort of an important development, right? For every one Google that became successful, there were 30, 40 other search algorithms that failed. We must remember stuff like that. So, or for every Facebook that tried, today we're talking about Meta in technology world, but people who were my generation, in the mid of my career, there was something called Second Life, which was a big deal at that point of time of a virtual world and stuff like that, but that failed. So what is it? So how do you understand the context? And for that, you need to learn constantly. Second, how do you accept what is becoming mainstream? Okay. And I often give this example. If I went to I started my career way back nearly 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now. If I went to my office on the first day with a tattoo, I don't know how my boss would have reacted. Today, people don't even think a second time when people come in and have a tattoo. It's like, it's just accepted as mainstream. We are seeing the whole thing. Again, I can go on and on. We are thinking about how people express themselves. What do they think of gender? All these things are changing. How do you know what is mainstream and what is that? That's a second thing. And finally, and this is very specific, influence of technology in our lives. How do you use it and not be controlled by it, not be subsumed by it? I think this is a very empowered generation. We are able to do computations which would have taken our predecessors months on our phone in no time. How do you use the processing? At the same time, I'm sure there are many people in this audience who are from education. There was so much emphasis on passing on information in education maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago. Today, it is so much more on perspectives. It is on using that information and stuff like that. So the three things, again, to summarize, that's what I would focus. That's what I would focus on. That's what we would focus on.
Wonderful. I think what's really coming out here is how we are learning constantly, and like to differentiate between fad and what is an improved development alongside. Professor Sahai, what would your take be? Because in an academic institution, how do you develop individuals? Because the professor stays in his position for many, many years. How is the next generation? How do you instigate? How do you sort of develop new professors just like you? Because you were the best professor of what? So many 50 thinkers. How do you initiate that dialogue between those students in your class?
Um, just let me start off with that relevance of learning. We wouldn't be having this whole conversation unless this was a relevant question to ask, right? How can we improve the process of learning? And I want to go back to something that Dr. Sanjeev mentioned right at the outset. The day that we can make learning as a way of, ritualize daily operations almost, right?
Yes.
That will be the day then we do not have to think about learning. It is happening on an auto mode. But we are very, very far away from that until the time that perhaps we can implant chips in the brains of people that makes learning almost automatic. And if Elon Musk has his way, then maybe in the next 5 or 10 years that may well happen. Who knows? But till such time that happens, I think we are stuck with trying to figure out ways and means to improve the learning process. And ultimately, I would just submit to you that it goes back to the point of an internal set of values and the compass that you use to drive yourself. So for us, it's about a learning process as a professor, as a corporate leader, as an NGO person. It doesn't really matter these days. You have to keep reinventing yourself, right? When I first came to IMA, I was teaching the pricing course. Then some years later, I started the neuroscience and consumer behavior course. And some years later, now there is the advanced customer insight course where we combine anthropology and big data and neuroscience. And very recently, when I started looking at an application area, which is fintech. So over the last 18 years, there are 4 or 5 different areas where one has learned new things. As the chairperson of India Gold Policy Center, I now know so much about gold as an industry, as a product, and was able to help with the setting up of the International Bullion Exchange and so on. So the question is, how does one keep reinventing oneself? And then this goes back to the issue of values about recruitment, about processes that both my co-panelists have been talking about, and about that transparency and the willingness to achieve feedback and putting in place that process that automatically makes sure that certain behaviors are engaged in. And if those behaviors happen, then learning becomes automatic, whether it is through rituals or whether it is through incentive mechanisms, whether it is through transparency of feedbacks. There can be so many different ways in which it can happen.
Wonderful, Professor Sai. I think we really got the crux of the whole talk, that is leadership for learning. And of course, everyone will have their own mantra for leadership for learning. But I think we will now take the questions from the audience. So Nagmani, do we have questions in our chat box, or will they write?
Yes, ma'am. There are a few questions which I'll be posing. I'll be taking from the chat and I'll be posing those questions. Is that okay with you?
Yes, please.
Yes. Ma'am, we have a question from one of the audience to Dr. Sanjeev. The question is, how does the culture of an organization help to develop second line of leadership? Can you give us some tips to develop that second line of leadership?
No, I think it's a very wonderful question and a very relevant question, because in today's time, the organization is only able to grow and build itself if there is a continuous process of building the second line. Now, when it comes to as I said, the culture of building the second line, I think it is again as a part of the overall organization system and process being created around it. Because without that, it becomes very whimsical and ad hoc. So what is the kind of leadership development process and system which has been created again, with the, as I said, blessing of the senior management and the leaders, because again, there has to be a compelling reason of having that institutionalized process of second line leadership development. In terms of the tips, I will say some of my, again, initiatives which we have done in current and previous organization is, the one is, it's become part of your performance management KPIs. That it's not about only that by accident or by default, we will be able to develop the second line. For each of the leader, each of the senior management member, one of the KPI is that in the next 12 months, what is the kind of upskilling or the coaching and mentoring you have done for your direct reportees, so that they can take up your role in the next, say 18 months to 24 months time. And that is measured, that is quarterly measured. Every quarter we have a kind of a discussion wherein we see out of that particular plan, what all have been implemented, what is the kind of knowledge transfer or you can say skill transfer which has happened, so that by design, we are moving towards that particular milestone where your direct reporting is getting developed into the successor to the particular position. And that is not only limited to see the top rung, it goes down further. And so it becomes a part of, again, as I said, the mechanism of reinforcing the entire performance deliverables around building second line. That's number one. Number two is the overall, you can say, strategy of the organization, that in the next 2 to 3 years, what is the kind of leadership pool I'm going to develop, who is ready not only to take these, for example, the role of your next line manager, but who can be even transported to various new roles which might come up because of the expansion and growth of the organization. And I think that's the most important piece. So we do have a performance potential matrix in the organization, which is a very, very scientific process by which we bucket the people basis, again, a very scientific assessment on their competencies, whether it's your leadership, whether your functional competencies, and competencies are again behaviors in line with your organization, you can say objective and strategy. And then basis that potential and performance matrix, we look at who are my top, you can say what you call the high potential fast track talent, who then become the you can say second line leadership or even the first line leadership in the say maximum 12 to 18 months time. And then you have another bucket who takes another 24 months to move into the what you call the higher bucket. So there is a absolutely I will say mechanism and a process by which we ensure that there is a continuous you can say development of that leadership pool which happens and your entire learning and development process, your career management process, your hiring process, your entire what you call leadership development process, everything then dovetail and integrated to this overall core objective of building the sustainable leadership for the organizational growth strategy. If I've answered the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sanjeev. I have another question, and that is for Dr. Lakshminarayan. The question is, how do strategic leaders, basically try to, understand certain puzzling questions or few pieces which just doesn't fit into the system? How do they overcome and approach such kind of situations, especially when it comes to learning outcomes?
Yeah. Well, I guess this question itself is one of those. It's a fairly fuzzy but complex question. I think the best again. I'll attempt an answer. I don't know whether it will satisfy the questioner, but they can always come back on the chat if it doesn't. I think whenever you face in real life a very complex problem, only ways that, again, there's a function of time. I'll keep that aside at a moment. But if you have time, you'll try to learn more about it. Try to learn more about it vertically, horizontally, and laterally. So vertically is to go either upstream. So if you have a problem, I'm just taking a business example on a B2C business, you'll either look at what are the models which have done it the hard way, which are the ones which have done it the modern way. Horizontally, you look at things which are in from other industries. So for a long time, the leadership training institutes in many companies in the early years of IT industry learn from some of the best education institutions in India as to how do they run their form. So you understand it. You may not get an exact answer, but you will get a sense. Okay. Third thing is you learn laterally, which is you look at something completely unrelated. So do you learn from sports? Do you learn from, like I said, history? Do you learn from the social sector? How do villages and communities solve certain problems? So you look vertical. You learn as much as possible. Beyond that, it is a function of your experience, expertise, and of course you will talk to your team, and you have to take a call on that. So my submission is that you have to learn as much as possible, and beyond that you have to take a decision, because I think the most important characteristic of any leader is the ability and the willingness to decide and take action.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think that we have another question which is asked by a school owner, actually. She says, what are those few vital evidence-based strategies which we need to get right as an organization? And what capacities needs to be built if to build or to accomplish these vital strategies. So this question is for Professor Sahai. Sir, if you can answer this question.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer this. I do not have much direct experience with schools. I can answer much more for higher educational institutions. But if I can take a stab at it, evidence-based strategies, essentially one has to look for data. Human beings are unfortunately configured to not look at data. We just look at the spikes in the data rather than the data as a whole, because that's how our brains are configured to look for extremes, contrasts, and so on. So very relevant question in the sense evidence-based strategies, right? So what are the kinds of evidence that one needs to gather to build schools or higher educational institutions? What is the kind of quality that you are delivering in the classroom? And student feedback is one reasonable way of getting it. But please remember that student feedback should not be the only way to measure quality, because many times students will not know what is the meaning of quality, and sometimes the ratings can also reflect simply their like or dislike of a teacher. What is the quality of the facilities that you are providing to the students that helps them to develop in other ways? We now know, for example, that physical activity, games, STEAM games, are critical to the mental development and emotional development of students. And so is the school providing enough avenues for physical exercises, games of different kinds that allow the full development of the brains of the students, of the children? This is as true at the age of 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 15, 18, till the brain is fully developed, which does not actually happen till around 25 years of age, when the executive command centers of the brains have reached a stage where we can say that this is a fully functioning human being, if I can put it that way. So that would be another bit of evidence. Then who is the audience that I'm catering to? What is the kind of education service that I want to provide? What is the level of education and the quality that I'm aspiring to? Our country has such a large need for education that I can choose to provide many different levels of quality of content that there is a good market for. And so I need to make careful choices in my area, in my geography, where is the larger demand? Because if everyone starts offering the same plain vanilla set of educational outcomes, then how is it that I'm different? What is it that I'm providing that's different from other providers? Because ultimately, if there is something that I'm providing that is different for the child's outcomes, then that will appeal to a set of people that are interested in those kinds of outcomes. And I will then have a unique proposition, a unique set of benefits that I'm providing from a learning outcome perspective for the students. So just some thoughts that I've kind of strung together for in terms of the question, but really, I probably Meenakshi Balakrishnan is much more qualified to answer that question than I am.
Not at all. Thank you, Professor. That was wonderful. And I would now like to ask Vijay Rajgopal. Vijay has a question to us. So Vijay, can you ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would like to address this question to all the panelists. I know we've been speaking at length about learning and leadership in a very positive sense. However, the reality of institutions, corporate houses, industry is that what qualifies as learning today is constantly shape-shifting, right? And what is useful knowledge today doesn't seem to be the case tomorrow. So my question is, how do the leaders deal with the irrelevance of knowledge? And do they really need to deal with it in order to move ahead? Anybody? I mean, it's open to the house.
I think.
Let me dive in with some trepidation over there. How do leaders deal with the irrelevance of knowledge? So for knowledge does have a shelf life, for example, but I think what does not go away are some critical skills that one needs to learn. So for example, the skill of critical thinking. Stanford had this whole curriculum review, the Stanford MBA program a few years ago. And ultimately, they came around and said that what we would like to teach our students is the skill of critical thinking, which, by the way, people have been doing in different ways at many institutions, the case-based learning at Harvard, at Ahmedabad. That's what one teaches, critical thinking. So there are some things which will remain evergreen. You could argue that one of these days you have a quantum-based artificial intelligence, and that can do critical thinking and everything else that a human can do. But hopefully, we are still some distance away. In terms of content that becomes outdated, that's an occupational hazard of learning, the learning process, right? So I invest some time in learning about blockchain and how it operates and what are the business applications, and I write some stuff on it. And for 3 or 4 years or 5 years or even 10 years, as it evolves and becomes more widespread, there is a currency to that. But in 15 years' time, it becomes not very relevant. Or I invest in learning how to program in C++ or JavaScript or R and so on. And the shelf life of one of these is a lot less, the others are a lot more. So there, one would need to be able to tap the wisdom of experts of the crowd to be able to understand what is it that's current and relevant and is likely to remain so for a longer period of time, and what is simply a fad which is going to crash and burn in the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And their good experts, teachers, leaders are really worth their weight in gold, because they bring a perspective about technologies, about skills, which are more likely to be around for a while versus what is less likely to be around for a while, and so on. So I hope that I was able to give a sense, but I'm not sure I can add too much more.
Okay. Dr. Sanjeev, would you like to comment about?
Yeah, so in today's world of internet and Google, I think there is no dearth of information and knowledge. Now, if you have to kind of categorize them into relevant and irrelevant, I think it is very, very unique from the perspective of the utility of the individual or the team or the organization in line with the objective. I think the way we do the entire filtering of the knowledge in terms of relevant or irrelevant is what is the objective it is serving. That's simple. Otherwise, everything under the sun is the knowledge. But then again, if you try to link it with from the context of what is the unique objective it is serving to you or your team and the organization, that's where the filtration happens. That's number one. Number two is ultimately what is the goal of acquiring this knowledge? The entire goal of acquiring this knowledge is moving the entire maturity scale of applying that knowledge, which becomes skill. And then the way you apply that skill with a kind of a disposition, which make it a competence. So ultimately, you have to move to that what you call level where you become competent. And once you become competent, then you are addressing all the aspect of the personal and professional objectives, which you want to kind of achieve, right? And I think the competence when we reach is nothing but the behavior you are demonstrating while applying those knowledge in terms of the skill, right? So, for example, I want to learn, say, computer, what do you call skills, right? So I acquire the knowledge about it, I apply it, I develop that computer skill, but I might not be the most competent person there unless until I bring in the element of whether it is excellence, whether it is your passion, whether it is your entire planning and execution, whether it is in terms of innovation. Now, these are the aspects which then make the entire, as I said, the level of the competence vis-a-vis a skill vis-a-vis the knowledge. And I think that is my take on this particular subject.
I think Mr. Lakshminarayan is.
Yeah. I was keeping silent long enough so that people will forget me, because I think
No.
Professor Sahai
Not
and
at all.
Dr. Dixit,
That
you've
is
covered
not
a lot.
Till the panel discussion is on.
Yeah. No. So I think they both covered it, and I think I like both the perspectives. And if I may sort of only say, I like the whole thing about you can again, it's human nature is to want to categorize them into simple buckets, right? So if there is content, there is skills, and if I may just add one more, which I used earlier, which is there is a context, right? And I think they are in the reverse order of shelf life. Content has perhaps the shorter skill life, and skills has the highest, because I think a lot of skills that we learn, like critical thinking and stuff like that, they have long things. Context change depending on the business environment, social environment, regulatory environment, and so on and so forth. So if we can just look at that, and then I would only add, what are you expected to do with it? The only angle I would add, is that something that is good to know? Like Dr. Dixit's example of, do I learn Python as a person who needs to appreciate it, or do I learn Python to code with Python for the next app, right? Depending on that, you can also decide on things. So if we can do a very some sort of broad thinking around that becomes easier, that when one thinks of something as to relevant or not relevant, and when finally apply the filter that Dr. Dixit said, which is it most relevant for your most important stakeholders? I guess that's how it is. Yeah, that's all I can think of at the moment.
I think with that, are there any more questions, Nagmani, or we could take the questions and we could send it to our panelists and they could send it across?
Yes, ma'am. There are questions. I think we can take it to the panelists later because the time is
right.
Can you please do the vote of thanks?
So thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Dixit, Ms. Lakshmi Narayan, and Professor Sahai. It's been wonderful. And you actually now initiated a big dialogue amongst teachers for us to understand, and for the leadership, for all the corporates and for the students who are here, and for the teachers and for the managers who are here, to start this dialogue about what is actually leadership for learning. And I think respect and empathy and how to be a lifelong learner, that's come across largely from this talk. And we really appreciate the time that you've spent with us. And I think there are big takeaways, and that would become another session, but lots of valuable suggestions, strategies for us to improvise and to think about. Thank you so much for spending this evening with us today. Thank you all the members who've come in at CLLE. Thanks you for spending your evening with the panelists. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy learning.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.